Welcome to Mother's Revenge, where heartfelt stories touch your soul and may even bring you to tears. I spent 26 years of my life building what I thought was my family's construction empire, only to be told I was not family at all. But the real shock came when I discovered who my actual father was, a man whose name made headlines around the world. My name is Richard Turner, though everyone calls me Rod. I am 45 years old, and 6 months ago I was somebody. I ran multi-million-dollar construction projects, commanded respect on job sites, had foremen twice my age asking for my advice. Today I am on my knees scrubbing strangers' toilets, wondering how I became invisible to the very people I called family. You need to understand something about Edward Bowden, the man I called Dad for 45 years. Edward built Bowden Development Group from nothing. He started with a pickup truck and a toolbox in 1978, and by the time he died last year, he was worth $92 million. He married my mother Helen when I was 3 years old, right after my biological father supposedly died in some factory accident. Edward raised me, taught me everything about construction, about business, about what he called earning your place in this world. His biological sons, my stepbrothers, Tyler and Brandon, they never had to earn anything. Tyler is 47 now, 2 years older than me, with soft hands that never held a hammer and a cocaine habit he thinks nobody knows about. Brandon is 44 younger than me by a year, and his biggest achievement is crashing 5 Ferraris before his 30th birthday. While I was learning to read blueprints at 16, they were learning to read wine labels at the country club. But here is what kills me. I believed we were family. Every Sunday dinner, every Christmas morning, every company milestone, I was there. When Edward had his first heart attack 7 years ago, I am the one who slept in that hospital chair for 2 weeks. When the company nearly went under during the 2010 recession, I am the one who worked 17-hour days to keep us afloat, who convinced our creditors to give us more time, who landed the government contract that saved everything. Rod, you are the son I always wanted. Edward told me that night after we had signed the papers that kept us in business. We were sitting in his office sharing a bottle of whiskey that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Blood does not make family. Loyalty does. I actually believed him. That is the part that makes me feel stupid now. I believed him right up until the lawyer read his will and my name was not on it. Not once, not anywhere. Tyler and Brandon split everything. The company, the money, the properties, even Edward's watch collection that included the Rolex I had helped him pick out for his 70th birthday. The lawyer's office that day was suffocating. Mahogany panels, leather chairs that squeaked when you shifted, and my stepbrothers smirking like they had won a game I did not even know we were playing. You are not real family, Rod. Tyler had said, not even pretending to look sorry. Never were. Dad was just too soft to tell you. You want to know what 26 years of 500 a.m. wake-ups amounts to, what pouring concrete in 104-degree heat, what negotiating with union bosses, what missing your own life to build someone else's dream gets you. Nothing. Less than nothing. Because at least if I had been a stranger, I would not have this hole in my chest where my family used to be. My mother Helen died 10 years ago from ovarian cancer. She went quick, which was a mercy, but it means I never got to ask her the questions that keep me up at night now. Questions about my real father, about why she lied, about whether she knew what Edward would do to me in the end. But sometimes life has a funny way of answering your questions when you are not even asking anymore. Sometimes the truth is sitting in a storage unit in Springfield, Missouri, waiting in a box that smells like mildew and broken promises. Sometimes your entire life is a lie, and the only way to find out who you really are is to lose everything you thought you were first. The day I found that birth certificate, the day I saw the name Nikolai Volkov where Samuel Turner should have been, that is the day I learned that my stepbrothers were wrong about one thing. I was not nothing. I was never nothing. I was just hidden. I am scrubbing bathroom tiles in a McMansion when my phone buzzes with a client cancellation. Mrs. Aldridge does not need me this Thursday after all. That is $190 gone, and I need every dollar. At 45, this is my life now. Knee-deep in other people's dirt hands, raw from bleach, back aching from years of manual labor that used to mean something more than just survival. 6 months ago, I was managing the Springfield Plaza development, a $58 million project that was going to reshape downtown. I had a corner office on the 13th floor of the Bowden Center, a secretary named Linda who brought me coffee exactly how I liked it, and a parking spot with my name on it. Senior Project Manager, the placard on my door said. Edward had that made special for me after I landed the city hospital expansion contract. Rod, you are the heart of this company. Edward would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder during company meetings. My boys might have my blood, but you have got my work ethic. He said it like it was a compliment. Now I realize it was just his way of justifying why I worked myself to the bone while Tyler and Brandon collected paychecks for titles that meant nothing. Vice President of Development, Executive Director of Operations, fancy words for showing up drunk to ribbon cuttings and taking credit for my work. Edward Bowden raised me since I was 3 years old. My mother Helen married him in the summer of 1982, just 8 months after my supposed father died. She was working as a bookkeeper at a construction supply company when they met. Edward always told the story the same way. I walked in to argue about an invoice, walked out with a dinner date, and 3 months later I had a ready-made family. He never adopted me officially. He said it was out of respect for my late father Samuel Turner, who supposedly died in a factory accident when a boiler exploded. A man should carry his father's name, Edward would say, even if another man raises him. I bought that explanation the same way I bought everything else Edward sold me. Hook, line, and sinker. The truth is, Edward was the only father I knew. He taught me to read blueprints before I could properly read books. I spent summers on job sites while other kids went to camp. By 16, I could frame a house-run electrical and sweet-talk building inspectors better than foremen twice my age. You are learning what Tyler and Brandon never will. Edward told me one July afternoon. We were standing on the skeleton of what would become a medical center, watching the sun set through steel beams. You are learning that nothing gets built without getting your hands dirty. Tyler was at Yale, then supposedly studying business, but mostly studying the bottom of beer bottles. Brandon was in his 3rd year at USC, majoring in communications, which is what rich kids study when they do not need jobs. They would come home for holidays tanned and soft laughing at my callous hands and the way I said reinforcement steel instead of rebar, because Edward taught me to use proper terminology. At least we are legitimate sons, Tyler said one Christmas when he was particularly drunk. Right, Brandon? We are not charity cases. Edward heard that. He did not say anything, just refilled his whiskey and changed the subject to the new contracts we had bid on. I should have known then. The silence said everything. But I was blind because I wanted to belong. Every successful project, every crisis I solved, every 17-hour day I put in, I thought I was earning my place at that table. When the economy tanked in 2010 and we were hemorrhaging money, I am the one who found a way through. I negotiated payment plans with suppliers, convinced the bank to extend our credit line, and landed 3 government contracts that kept 240 men employed. Edward hugged me when we signed those contracts. Actually, hugged me, tears in his eyes. You saved us, son. You saved everything I built, son. He called me son. The cancer appeared in his lungs first, then spread everywhere else like it was making up for lost time, 5 months from diagnosis to death. I managed the company during the day and sat with him every night, watching him shrink into his hospital bed, watching the morphine steal the man who taught me everything I thought I knew about loyalty. take care of the company," he whispered 2 days before he died. "You are the only one who understands what it means." I thought that was his way of telling me I would inherit it. I thought wrong. The morning I am cleaning this bathroom, scraping soap scum from designer tiles that cost more than I make in a week, I realize Edward taught me everything about building and nothing about protecting what you build. He taught me to work. He did not teach me to matter. The cancer took Edward fast, 5 months from diagnosis to funeral. The doctors called it aggressive, but that did not do justice to how it ate through him. One day he was yelling at suppliers on the phone. The next he could barely lift his head from the pillow. I was there every single day, juggling the company during business hours and keeping vigil at his bedside every night. "Make sure the Hillcrest project stays on schedule," he would rasp between morphine doses. "Watch the concrete pours yourself. Tyler will not know if they are shorting us on the mix." Even dying Edward knew his biological sons were not capable of running a hot dog stand, let alone a construction empire. Tyler visited twice during those 5 months. The first time he stayed 10 minutes and asked about the company's liquid assets. The second time he brought papers for Edward to sign something about power of attorney. Brandon came once for an Instagram photo, posting it with hashtags about family and love, while Edward was barely conscious. He stayed long enough for the likes to roll in, then disappeared to a wine tasting in Monterey. "Where are my boys?" Edward asked one night, his eyes searching the empty doorway. "They will come tomorrow," I lied, adjusting his blanket. "Tyler is handling the Springfield permits, and Brandon is meeting with the attorneys." Edward nodded like he believed me, but we both knew better. They were probably at the country club planning how to spend their inheritance. The funeral was a production. Tyler and Brandon front and center, wearing designer suits, and practiced grief. They gave speeches about their beloved father, about carrying on his legacy, about family values. I sat in the third row behind Edward's golf buddies and business associates. The calluses on my hands, the only proof I had ever been part of building what they were now claiming. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday, 9:00 a.m. sharp, at Morris Dalton and Partners. The law firm occupied the top floor of a building Edward and I had constructed 10 years earlier. I knew every beam in that structure, every joint, every place we had had to reinforce when the soil reports came back worse than expected. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one Edward bought me when I landed the Springfield Plaza project. "You look like an executive," he had said, then straightening my tie. "My son, the executive." The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and lemon furniture polish. Tyler and Brandon were already there, lounging in wingback chairs like they owned the place, which I was about to learn they did. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Morris asked, his voice careful and measured like he was defusing a bomb. The will was 28 pages long. Edward had thought of everything. Charitable donations to the Children's Hospital, his car collection to an automotive museum, his golf clubs to his buddy Harold. Even his dog Max had provisions going to his neighbor Mrs. Castillo with a trust fund for his care. "To my beloved sons, Tyler and Brandon Bowden. I leave the entirety of Bowden Development Group, all associated assets, real estate holdings, and the sum of $92 million to be split equally between them." The words hung in the air like dust after demolition. I waited. Surely there was more. Surely my name would appear in the next paragraph, the next page somewhere. Morris kept reading. More charities, Edward's watch collection to a museum, his books to the library. Nothing. Nothing with my name on it. "Excuse me," I finally said, my voice sounding strange and hollow. "There must be a mistake. What about me? What about Rod?" Tyler laughed. He actually threw his head back and laughed like I had told the best joke he had ever heard. "You are not real family, Rod. Never were. Dad was just too soft to tell you. But I built half this company," I said, standing now, my hands flat on Morris' mahogany desk. "The Springfield Plaza, the Hillcrest development, the city hospital expansion. I saved the company in 2010. Edward said I was the heart of Bowden Development Group. As an employee, Brandon interrupted, examining his manicured nails with practiced boredom. A well-paid employee. Check your last pay stub if you want your severance. Severance. The word came out like a croak. I worked there for 26 years. I bled for that company, and you were compensated for your time, Tyler said, already pulling out his phone, probably checking stock prices or texting his dealer. Market rate. Actually, Dad kept excellent records. You cannot claim we owe you anything more. Morris could not meet my eyes. He shuffled papers, clicked his pen repeatedly, cleared his throat. I am sorry, Mr. Turner. There is no provision for you in the will. Your final paycheck will include accumulated vacation time and the standard severance package as per company policy. 4 weeks. 4 weeks. 26 years compressed into 4 weeks of pay. I looked at the framed photo on Morris' desk. Edward and him at some charity golf tournament, both grinning, both holding cocktails. Did you know, I asked Morris? When Edward was making this will, did you advise him I cannot discuss my conversations with clients? He said. But his face told me everything. He knew. Edward knew. Everyone knew, except me. Starting over at 45 is not just humbling, it is brutal. No college degree because Edward said experience was better than education. Why waste 4 years in a classroom when you can learn from me, he had said when I was 18. No savings because I reinvested everything into the company, buying shares that turned out to be worthless paper, believing I was building my future. My reputation in construction meant nothing without the Bowden name behind it. I applied to every construction company in a 100-mile radius. The responses were all variations of the same theme. We are looking for someone with more recent project management certification, or your experience is impressive, but we need someone who fits our current team dynamic. Translation. Tyler and Brandon had poisoned the well. Word travels fast in construction circles, and the word was that Richard Turner had been cut loose for a reason. My savings ran out in 2 months. The apartment I had rented, thinking it was temporary, became my permanent reality. I sold my truck, my tools, even the gold watch Edward had given me for my 40th birthday. The pawn shop owner offered me $300 for it. It is engraved, he shrugged, like Edward's message to Rod, my son, in every way that matters, decreased its value. I started clean slate services with a bucket, a mop, and whatever pride I could salvage. My first client was Agnes Cooper, my former secretary Linda's mother. Oh, Rod, she had said when she opened her door, her eyes full of the kind of pity that makes you want to disappear. How the mighty have fallen. But good for you, dear, for not being too proud to work. 8 months into my new life, I had built up enough clients to eat regularly and make rent. My days started at 4:00 a.m. and ended at 10:00 p.m. Office buildings before dawn, private homes during the day, commercial spaces at night. My knees were shot. My hands permanently smelled like bleach, and I developed a chronic cough from all the cleaning chemicals. This was my life now, and I was making peace with it. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Mr. Turner, this is Springfield Storage Solutions. We have a unit registered to Helen Turner from 1982 that has been flagged for auction due to non-payment. You are listed as an emergency contact. Would you like to claim the contents before we proceed? My mother had been dead for 10 years. I did not even know she had a storage unit. The fee to prevent auction was $400. Money I did not really have, but something made me pay it anyway. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just wanting to hold on to something that connected me to her to a time before everything went wrong. The unit was small 5 by 10, packed with boxes that smelled like mothballs and forgotten time. Her wedding dress from her marriage to Edward was on top, carefully wrapped in plastic that had yellowed with age. Underneath were photo albums, boxes of my baby clothes, her jewelry box with the costume pearls she wore to church every Sunday. I almost missed the filing box. It was shoved in the back corner, water-stained and held together with duct tape that was more hope than adhesive. Inside were tax returns from the early 80s, birthday cards she had saved, and a manila envelope marked important documents in her careful handwriting. My birth certificate was at the bottom, the official raised seal still visible despite the years. I had never actually seen it before. Edward had always handled any documentation I needed, from my driver's license to my passport application. Name: Richard Samuel Turner. Mother Helen Marie Turner. Father Nikolai Volkov. I read it 3 times. Nikolai Volkov, not Samuel Turner, the factory worker who supposedly died when a boiler exploded. Someone named Nikolai Volkov was my father. My hands were shaking as I sat in my van outside the storage unit, typing the name into my phone with fingers that did not want to cooperate. The search engine auto-filled after just a few letters like this name mattered, like it was something people looked for. The Wikipedia page loaded slowly on my cracked screen. The first line made me pull over properly, afraid I might crash. Nikolai Volkov, 1952 to 1981. Russian-American businessman and heir to the Volkov mining dynasty. Below was a black-and-white photograph from what looked like a formal event. The man in the picture could have been me 20 years ago. Same jawline, same deep-set eyes, the same nose that Edward always joked did not match anyone else in the family. I kept reading. Each sentence rewrote my entire history. My father was not a factory worker. He was an heir to a mining fortune that stretched from Siberia to Utah. He did not die in an industrial accident. He disappeared during a federal investigation, leaving behind an estate worth billions and a son nobody knew existed. My mother had not married Edward for love. She had married him for protection, creating a new identity for both of us, burying the truth under decades of lies and Sunday dinners. Every story about Samuel Turner, every tear she had shed on the anniversary of his supposed death. Every time she had told me I had his work ethic, all of it was fiction. The Wikipedia article filled my phone screen, each paragraph more surreal than the last. I was still sitting in my van outside the storage unit, engine running, heat blasting against the November cold, reading about a father I never knew existed. Nikolai Volkov controlled approximately 48% of Soviet-era uranium exports to the West through shell companies based in Norway and Ireland. His legitimate businesses included Northern Ridge Minerals, which operated copper and silver mines across Utah, Colorado, and Oregon. At the time of his disappearance in 1981, his net worth was estimated at $3.3 billion. The article continued with details about federal investigations, suspected ties to money laundering, and his mysterious disappearance just days before he was scheduled to testify before a grand jury. But one section made me drop my phone entirely. Volkov's estate remains in federal trust, pending location of legitimate heir. A sealed court record from 1979 indicates one surviving child from a relationship with Helen Marie Turner. The child's identity was protected under federal witness protection protocols. Current estimated value of the estate with interest investments and mineral rights: $5.5 billion. $5.5 billion. The numbers did not even seem real. I picked up my phone from the van floor and called the number listed for the law firm managing the estate, Harding, Cole & Partners in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Harding, Cole & Partners. How may I direct your call? I need to speak to someone about the Nikolai Volkov estate. I said, my voice barely working. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought she had hung up. Sir, may I have your name? Richard Turner. I think I might be his son. Please hold. The hold music was classical. Something with violins that seemed too elegant for a conversation about to flip my entire world upside down. Within 30 seconds, a man's voice came on the line. Mr. Turner, this is Daniel Harding. We have been waiting for your call for 35 years. The next 6 hours felt like living in someone else's life. Harding had a private jet dispatched to pick me up. By evening, I was in a conference room that overlooked the PTOAC, surrounded by lawyers and federal investigators who had been searching for Nikolai Volkov's heir since before I could walk. "Your mother was brilliant," Agent Aaron Collins from the FBI explained, sliding a thick file across the table. "She contacted us after your father's disappearance, terrified that his business associates would come after you. We placed her in protective custody, created the Samuel Turner identity as your fictional deceased father, and helped her relocate to California. But she married Edward Bowden," I said, still trying to piece it all together. "Her idea." Collins nodded. "She said marrying a small-time construction owner would provide the perfect cover. Who would look for a billionaire's heir in a working-class family? She was supposed to tell you the truth when you turned 25, but by then, Edward Bowden had become more successful than anyone anticipated. She was afraid of what he might do if he knew. The DNA test was a formality. My face was practically a carbon copy of Nikolai's. The blood work came back as a 99% match within 2 hours. The lawyers had been preparing for this moment for decades. Every document ready, every form pre-filled, just waiting for my signature. "The federal government has managed the estate conservatively," Harding explained, pulling up spreadsheets that made my head spin. "The mining operations alone generate approximately $200 million annually. The invested capital has grown exponentially. There are properties in 15 countries, a stake in 3 major banks, and mineral rights that extend across half of Oregon." "This cannot be real," I kept saying, but the evidence was overwhelming. Photos of my father at White House dinners, documents showing secret meetings with government officials, records of the threats that made my mother run. "Your mother gave up everything to keep you safe," Collins said, showing me letters my mother had written to the FBI over the years, checking in, making sure the coast was clear. "She could have claimed this fortune at any time by revealing your identity, but she chose to scrub toilets and marry a man she did not love to protect you." The final document was a letter from my father written the day before he disappeared. It was addressed to his unborn child. He had known my mother was pregnant when he vanished. "My dear child," it read in careful English. "If you are reading this, then the world has finally become safe enough for you to know who you are. I have made many mistakes, trusted the wrong people, but you are not one of them. You are my greatest achievement, even though I will never meet you. The money is just numbers. The power is just an illusion. But you are real. Live the life I could not. Be the person I failed to be. Your loving father, Nikolai." I signed the papers at midnight, officially claiming my inheritance, $5.5 billion transferred into accounts bearing my name. The kid who had been told he was nothing, who had been cleaning toilets that morning, was now one of the wealthiest men in America. The irony is not lost on me. Tyler and Brandon split $92 million between them. The federal trust transferred $5.5 billion to my newly established accounts. But sitting in that Philadelphia hotel room at 2:00 a.m., staring at bank statements that looked like phone numbers, I did not feel victorious. I felt empty. The money did not bring back the 26 years I had wasted believing I was building a family legacy. It did not erase the image of Edward dying without ever telling me the truth. It did not explain why my mother chose to live a lie rather than claim what was rightfully ours. But it did give me something I had never had before: the power to write my own story. My first call was to my lawyer. My lawyer, not the company's, not Edward's, mine. "I want to buy Bowden Development Group," I said. "Sir, with your resources, you could buy 10 companies that size." "I do not want 10 companies. I want the one I built." The acquisition took 3 weeks. Tyler and Brandon had already burned through $8 million each on cars, cocaine, and failed cryptocurrency investments. When my offer came in $50 million cash, non-negotiable, they jumped at it like drowning men reaching for a life raft. The day I walked back into the Bowden Center, Linda, my old secretary, dropped her coffee cup. "Mr. Turner, but how long story?" I said, heading to what used to be Edward's office. "But I am back." I kept the Bowden name on the building, on the trucks, on everything. Not out of respect for Edward, but because I had earned that name with my sweat, my blood, my sacrificed weekends and holidays. It was mine as much as it had ever been his. Within a month, Tyler and Brandon had blown through the rest of their money. They showed up at my office, Edward's old office, wearing the same designer suits from the will reading now wrinkled and stained. Rod Buddy Tyler started that fake smile plastered on his face. Family helps family, right? I leaned back in Edward's old chair, the leather creaking the same way it had when he told me I was not really his son. "You were right, Tyler. I am not family. Never was. Your words remember. Come on." That was just the grief talking. Brandon tried his hands, shaking slightly. Withdrawal or nerves, I could not tell. "Dad would want you to help us." "Your dad," I corrected, "left you $92 million. What happened to it?" They could not answer. Tyler stared at his shoes. Brandon picked at his cuticles. These were the men who had laughed at my callous hands, who had called me a charity case, who had told me I was nothing. "I will give you jobs," I said, finally. They both looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. "Entry level. You will start as project assistant, same as I did at 16. Minimum wage plus commission if you bring in contracts. You will report to Rafael, my new foreman. He does not speak much English, so you will need to learn Spanish." "You are joking," Tyler said. "I am offering you the same opportunity Edward gave me to earn your place. Take it or leave it." They took it. What choice did they have? They show up every day now. Soft hands finally meeting hard work. Rafael sends me photos sometimes. Tyler carrying lumber. Brandon learning to read blueprints. They are terrible at it, but they are trying. That is more than they ever did when they had millions. I use my fortune differently than my father did. Differently than Edward did. The first thing I built was affordable housing for construction workers. The men who actually create the skylines but cannot afford to live in the shadows of what they build. The complex has a daycare, a medical clinic, and a community center where kids can learn trades if college is not their path. In my desk drawer, I keep 2 photos. One is of Edward and me at my first job site, both of us covered in sawdust and grinning. Despite everything he did teach me the value of hard work. The other is of Nikolai Volkov, the father I never knew, whose absence shaped my entire life in ways I am still discovering. My mother's storage unit is now a small museum in my house. Her photos, her letters, her carefully constructed lies that kept me safe. I keep them all. She gave up billions to protect me from the dangerous men who wanted my father's fortune. She scrubbed floors and lived with a man she did not love, so I could grow up normal, safe, invisible. That is love. Real love. The kind that does not need blood or money to prove itself. Sometimes the family you lose shows you who you really are. Sometimes being told you are nothing makes you realize you were always something more. And sometimes the truth buried in a storage unit is worth more than any inheritance, because it does not just change your bank account. It changes your entire understanding of who you are, where you came from, and what you are capable of becoming. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that their value is not determined by others. Leave a comment below about a time when you discovered your own worth after someone tried to diminish it. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of redemption, revelation, and the truth about what really makes a family. Thank you for watching.